Hello, can everyone hear me?
I can.
Hello, good evening. I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we just wait about 5 more minutes for some more people to join who've registered, and then we'll crack on. Thank you everyone for joining us on our event. Okay, we'll just wait about 4 more minutes and see if anyone else is joining the webinar, and then we'll crack on. Do you want to maybe share your first slide, Danny, while we're waiting? We just share screen and just share as well.
Okay. Let's do that. Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. All right, let's make a start. Thank you everyone for coming, for joining us on our first webinar. I'm Tomiwa. I'm the lead for CGAF Neurosurgery. We're joined here today by Damilola Jesuya Julu, who is a junior clinical fellow at the Northern Care Alliance NHS Foundation Trust. He's got a keen interest in neurosurgery, and he's written about, published four papers with a neurosurgery theme. One of those papers is about becoming a neurosurgeon in the UK and providing a roadmap for medical students and early career doctors. And so we thought it would be a good idea to invite him along tonight to share with us some insights from that paper and from other sources that he's gathered, and just share with some of those insights with us tonight. Just a brief kind of overview. So SIGAF stands for Surgery Interest Group of Africa, and the aim is to provide medical students and early career doctors across the continent of Africa networking opportunities, research opportunities, access to teaching, access to guidance towards their desired surgical pathways, and one of which is neurosurgery. And this is part of why we're doing this this webinar this evening. What we'll do is Dame will give us his talk, and then afterwards we'll have a question and answer session. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll pick those up as we're going along, and then we'll pose it to our panel. And then I'll invite my assistant up to the stage as well. So this is Temi Dayo. He's the assistant for the SIGAF Neurosurgery Group. And so, after the talk, we'll field some questions. If you look on the left-hand side of your screen, there's a sessions tab. And in that sessions tab, there's a tab for networking. So if people want to go into that session and have the opportunity to talk to one another face-to-face via video call, please feel free to do that afterwards. Okay, handing over to you, Dami.
Thank you, Tomo, for the opportunity to share this presentation. Just to confirm, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just crack on then. So I've tried to design this to be as interactive as possible. So yeah, we'll just start. So the topic is basically becoming a neurosurgeon in the United Kingdom, a roadmap for medical students and early career doctors. The idea behind this is to just sort of give a roadmap, something to look forward to in a step-by-step manner as to how you can get into neurosurgery training in the United Kingdom. Just a general overview, really. So the first thing is, what stage are you? Are you a medical student, early career doctor, or trainee? And this is really important as it will give you insight as to what the things are that you can do to optimize your chances of getting into neurosurgery training. So generally, I'll be talking towards medical students and early career doctors. And when you're considering neurosurgery, I think the general question you should ask yourself is, why do you want to do neurosurgery? Because as we will see from this presentation, it's not all roses and all. So you should have a strong reason for doing neurosurgery. I know a lot of people want to do neurosurgery because of an inspiration by Ben Carson also, but the reason has to be more than that, especially if you want to study neurosurgery in the United Kingdom in particular as an international medical graduate. So I'll just give a general overview about neurosurgical training in the United Kingdom. It's about 8 years. The basic training is about 8 years. You go through specialty training from years 1 to years 8. Surgery training in the United Kingdom primarily is divided into core surgical training, where you have your CT1 and CT2, and then you apply again for higher specialty training, where you have your ST3 to ST8. But some specialties have what we call run-through training programs. Meaning when you get in at ST1, it's straight run-through to ST8. And neurosurgery is one of them. Usually for those going through ST1 to ST8, they have what we call a national training number, which is controlled by the Yorkshire and Humber Deanery. Um, yeah, but there are alternatives as well. There's something we call the Caesar pathway, which is a certificate of eligibility to specialty registration. I will talk about that in a bit. But that's just a general overview of neurosurgery in the United Kingdom, ST1 to ST8. Now, depending on where you are, if you're a medical student or an early career doctor outside the United Kingdom, there's some additions, before this ST1 to ST8. You have to get registered with the General Medical Council, first of all, and then demonstrate that you're ready to enter specialty training. So if you're a medical student, the first thing you need to do is to finish medical school, have your internship, then write the PLAB exams, which I'm sure we are familiar with, professional and linguistic board exams. So you write the first exam, the PLAB 1, you write the PLAB 2, and then you apply for GMC registration. Once you've gotten your GMC registration, you would get what we call a CREST form, which is basically a certificate to say that yes, you are ready to enter specialty training. For graduates who train in the United Kingdom, they go directly into what we call the foundation training, which is basically the equivalent of internship outside the United Kingdom. And when they are done, they get what we call an FPCC, which is basically saying that they are also ready to enter specialty training. Yeah. So, just to dive into the meat of the matter. So, there's the application cycle. Usually, in the United Kingdom, the application is centralized through a system called Oriel, and usually the application cycle usually starts around October to November, at least for the ST1 application. Usually, most of the surgical specialties at CT1 and ST1 level, they put out the applications around this point in time, and there are some requirements for neurosurgery to be shortlisted for an interview. So once you've gotten your registration, the next thing is, and of course your CREST form, the next thing is to wait for November where you'd apply, and after you have applied, if you are successful, you will be shortlisted for an interview, and after the interview, you get an offer. But it's not as straightforward as I have put it, as there are some things you need to be shortlisted for an interview. Just a brief background as to how competitive neurosurgery training is. In the United Kingdom, generally, there are less than 30 slots yearly allotted for neurosurgical trainees. Um, Actually, there are less than 20 now. Last I heard, about 18 or thereabout, and you have over 100 to 150 people applying for these slots, putting this at a competition ratio of at least above 5. So meaning you have about 5 people vying for one slot, which is why neurosurgery is one of the most competitive specialties in the United Kingdom. Second only to cardiothoracic surgery, which has an even higher competition ratio. So moving on, at this stage of the roadmap, we would have assumed that you've graduated medical school, you've done your internship, and you've written your PLAB exams. You're now GMC registered. You've worked for a while in the United Kingdom. You have your CREST form, and you're now hoping to apply for specialty training. Or if you trained in UK, you've done your FY1, and at your F2 level or possibly your F3 level, you're now looking to apply for neurosurgery training. This is where it gets tricky. You need to understand how the system works. And there are 3 basic things that you need to know. The first one is the neurosurgery shortlisting matrix. The second is the multi-specialist recruitment assessment exam. And the last is the interview. These 3 things are what will generate your final score and your ranking position, and based on your rank, you will be given an offer. Bear in mind that you can do well in all these three slots, and you can be deemed appointable. But because there are about 18 slots thereabouts, if you rank, say, number 20 or number 21, the chances that you get an offer is very, very slim. Okay, so um, let's start from the neurosurgery shortlisting matrix. So if you remember, I said that the application is centralized. So meaning everybody applies through a central system called Oracle. You put in, you fill a set of questions. Sometimes you may be required to upload evidence on this Oracle portal, and there are trained assessors that are going to view this application that you have made and score the application. The application is scored against a matrix. There are about two assessors, and then you have double the scores coming from this shortlisting matrix in particular. This will be combined with the score from the MSRA and the score from the interview, but I'll talk about this in a bit more detail. I've taken a sample of the shortlisting matrix for the 2022 National Neurosurgery Selection. The document basically, it's available to everyone freely. So I'll talk a bit about each and every point. Now, the thing about neurosurgery is it's usually advisable that you make this decision very early in your career, and you've made up your mind that you want to come to the UK very early in your career, so that this would afford you time to start working on some of these things that can improve your chances at getting an interview. Because if you decide too late, you may realize that some of these things you may not be able to do them in time. Before we progress, I should mention that there is an eligibility criteria before you even apply, and this is tied to your experience limits. If you have had more than 24 months, I believe, of clinical experience outside your internship year, you will be deemed overqualified to apply at ST1. Okay, that's very, very important. If you have more than 24 months of clinical experience anywhere in the world outside of your internship year, you are overqualified to apply at ST1 level. And if you have more than 12 months in neurosurgery or any neuro-related specialty outside of your foundation year, you would also be deemed overqualified, and you'd have to apply at the higher level, which is very, 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 very competitive. I'll talk about the higher level towards the end, but for now, let's talk about this scores and descriptors. As you can see on the left-hand side, there is the domain, and on the right-hand side, there is the scoring range. At the end of this shortlisting matrix, once the assessors assess the application, it's going to give you a particular score based on this matrix. Now, the matrix targets things that can be done at undergraduate and postgraduate level. The first point looks at your undergraduate career. Have you done any research, any published research during your undergraduate year? Have you done any audits during your undergraduate year, or any QIPs? Or have you got any prizes and awards in your undergraduate year? So this first point just aims to select medical students that have been exceptional really in medical school, and there's a scoring range from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. So for example, a medical student who has a lot of distinctions, graduated with honors, and also published possibly 1 to 2 research manuscripts will likely get the maximum point here, and someone with none will get 0 here. The next is undergraduate clinical electives and attachments. Neurosurgery is a very, very demanding field, and they expect that you should have gotten some form of taste during medical school, because then it will be believable that you understand what it takes to do neurosurgery, and These essentially are people that they would want in the specialty. And there's so as I'm talking about each of the points, you can just look to the right hand side to look at the scoring range for the components of this matrix. Next is higher degree, involving full-time original research. So higher degrees, I'm sure you're familiar with that. After MBBS, do you have any other higher degree? Do you have a master's, an MD? Do you have a PhD? Um, Intercalated degrees are common in the UK and in some other countries, but they are not too common in Africa. But some people do have them. So if you have a PhD, apart from the normal MBBS, you are at you have a better chance as opposed to someone who does not have that. But however, it's just 3 points. You can still rack up points in other parts of the descriptors. The next is first degree in medical sciences, which is if you have a BSc or a B Med Sci, and then other degrees and diplomas that are not related to these first two. Moving on, there's postgraduate research. So if you've been involved in postgraduate original research that has been published and you can show this with evidence, you'll be able to get points for that. Postgraduate academic awards and prizes. So if you've been able to get any award or prize after finishing medical school, which could be poster prizes from presenting at conferences, essay prizes for trainees or people that have graduated medical school. If you've had any award or prize, that will count towards this point here. The level of the prizes matters. If you've gotten a prize at a national or international level, you get the maximum marks. But if it's local, you likely get 1. Postgraduate clinical courses are very important. Usually, to get maximum marks, you need to have done about 4 to 6 courses in neurosurgery, I believe. Now, the thing about postgraduate clinical courses is it's a gray area, really. But courses that will definitely count towards this are courses that are granted CPD points by any of the Royal Colleges, whether Royal College of Surgeons England or Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. Usually these are the courses that count. It's better that these courses are neurosurgery themed courses to show commitment to the specialty. Of course, courses like basic surgical skills and advanced trauma life support are likely going to count in this regard. Publications are very, very, very important in any surgical training, preferably published in journals that are indexed in PubMed or Medline and other standard databases. Publishing 3 manuscripts as first author would definitely grant you maximum marks in this category. However, if you've published in other journals or you've had named author status or co-author status, you can still get points here, but just not maximum points. Presentations at conferences are also very important. If you've presented at local conferences, regional conferences, national and international conferences, they matter. If they're poster presentations or oral presentations, they also matter. Naturally, oral presentations at international or national conferences attract the highest mark, followed by poster presentations at international conferences, oral presentations at regional conferences, in that hierarchy, so to say. At this point, I can say that you can double up or triple up on achievements. So, for example, if you've published and you've presented, the same article could count for 2 to 3 categories. In neurosurgery, this people have done this, but in core surgical training, for that is frowned upon. But if you're aiming towards neurosurgery, yes, that can count and it can help. Yeah. So next is clinical audits and quality improvement projects. The NHS is very, very big on clinical audits and quality improvement projects because ultimately that's how the system can improve. Identifying a problem and solving the problem and ensuring that the problems that have been solved are, they remain solved. That's the essence of clinical audits. And, some of these things are not too popular, in Africa or in African countries, especially sub-Saharan Africa. So, as medical students and early career doctors, before coming to the UK, these are some of the things that you can do, very, very easily in your local hospital, or local teaching hospital. Try to conduct a small audit or a quality improvement project and try to get it presented at a local or national conference, and that will count. Um, so, usually, if you've done about 2 to 3 audits and you've done about 2 to 3 cycles of these audits, you would likely get maximum marks, in this category. If you've done an audit, if and you've published it and you've presented it at the conference, you can potentially rack up points in at least 3 categories here. Next is organization and leadership skills. Again, the level matters. Take if you've um, if you've represented an organization or a body at any stage, this would count as leadership skills because it's shown that you've effectively handled a leadership role to the best of your abilities. And again, the level matters. If you've taken a local leadership role like the um, house job representative, that could count as local. And then up and up like that. If you've taken a regional leadership role, that will count for you. And if you've taken an international or national leadership role, that will score maximum points. Remember that everything we're discussing here needs paper evidence. So if you've potentially done some of these things, but you do not have evidence, it does not count. So next is practical and psychomotor skills. Again, this is sort of a gray area, but generally this is the place where you sort of show your hobbies and show the skills and the things you have done. Generally, it's been said that if you have a national or international level achievement in sports, say for example, there are NMA games, maybe Nigerian Medical Association games that are national, or any medical sort of sporting events that are national, or any event at all that relates to practical and psychomotor skills, really, you can get maximum points here. There is no particular cap or style here. I've seen people, put that, they do the Rubik's cube well. There's people that have put that they are good video gamers. Some control drones and things like that. So this is really the place where you sort of show your extracurriculars and your hobbies, musical instruments and all of that. But generally, national or international level achievements in this category will earn you maximum points. Then there's teaching. So if teaching is again, it's another important skill that doctors must have. Usually, if you've gotten a formal teaching role, possibly as an anatomy demonstrator, or a teacher in a medical school, you would get maximum points for this. Otherwise, just showing that you've been involved in teaching your juniors and your peers with evidence of feedback forms and possibly letters to show that you've actually taught. This would also carry some points. Now, generally, these are the components of the shortlisting matrix. Sometimes they may add other columns, like they did this year, to basically sort of gauge your interest in neurosurgery. Why do you want to do neurosurgery? If it's not put, if it's not put at the shortlisting matrix stage, it would be asked during the interview. So whichever way, you should start cultivating why you want to do neurosurgery and sort of build it up and sort of build your career towards reasons why you should do neurosurgery. Which is why this question here is very, very, very important. You don't just get it for try to do neurosurgery because you've been motivated by watching a movie or a book. Have a genuine reason for wanting to do neurosurgery. So usually at the end of this shortlisting matrix, the maximum points you can get is 42. In the previous years, it was about 33, and you have two assessors assessing this portfolio. When the assessing is done, you are given scores, and they're added to the scores you get from this exam, which is the MSRA. The MSRA is called the Multi Specialist Recruitment Assessment, and as the name implies, it's an assessment that just sort of shows that you have the basic knowledge needed during residency training. And the basic knowledge is it's clinical and it's situational. And it's not only neurosurgery that requires the MSRA. Other specialties like general practice, obstetrics and gynecology, ophthalmology, radiology, a couple of these specialties require the applicants to sit for this exam, and it's free of charge. By the way, the situational judgment test is one of them, and it just basically tests how you would react in certain situations, basically following the principles of the good medical practice. The good medical practice is a book, just like the ethical books, um, if you're not in the UK, if you induct in your country, usually your medical council gives you a book on ethics and the do's and don'ts and things like that. And the good medical practice is the equivalent of that here in the UK. And understanding the good medical practice would help, in preparing for the situational judgment test, as well as some other materials, that you would come across along the way. And then the other part of the MSRA is the clinical aspect. Um, yeah, so sort of these two parts sort of they make up the exam, and you're given a score at the end of the exam. The score is then scaled down to an appropriate percentage and added to the results from this portfolio. Once an absolute score is then gotten, this score would be used to shortlist people for an interview. If you've successfully scaled through this phase, you're then invited for an interview. Traditionally, the interview is face to face, but in recent times, due to the pandemic, the interview has been virtual. And in the interview, the interview carries the most marks, by the way. So if you've not done too good in the portfolio station and you've not done well in the MSRA, but you've done well good enough to get an interview, um, if you perform well in the interview, there's a good chance you may be ahead of others who do not do well in the interview but potentially got good portfolio scores. And there are two major kinds of stations. Again, the content of this interview sort of it changes as time goes on, but they're just general themes that you should expect. There's the presentation or portfolio station, and there's the clinical station. And the face-to-face, when things were face-to-face, traditionally at the selection center, you would have your portfolio with you, and the assessors would take a look at your portfolio and ask you questions based on the evidence I presented in the portfolio. They could also tell you to make a presentation on why you're interested in doing neurosurgery or why you want to do neurosurgery. And it should be genuine and proper to get good marks in this station. And then there's the clinical station, which basically tests your all-round ability to work well in a neurosurgery department. The stations are not just stuff based or related to clinical. It's aimed to test your all-round ability to excel in neurosurgery department in the NHS. And traditionally, of course, the first is the clinical neurosurgery scenarios, where you're given a station to walk through, followed by a simulation station where your communication skills are tested, your ability to communicate, with the patients, almost mirroring sort of the PLAB2 exams. Next is the telephone stations. You need to be able to take and make referrals in a neurosurgery department because as a neurosurgical trainee, part of your duties in the department will be to take referrals from general hospitals and local hospitals. In Manchester, for example, there's a big regional neurosurgery center at Salford, and most of the patients are through referrals from everywhere in the northwestern part of Manchester. So the ability to be able to take referrals, to make prompt decisions as regards management and to handle any scenario over the phone or through the system, is very, very important for any would-be neurosurgical trainee. Next is management stations, always very important. You'll be under a lot of pressure in the NHS, and there would be tricky scenarios that would come on, and your ability to manage these situations is what the examiner will be looking for. There's no right or wrong answer in this station, really. It's just to see how you deal with conflict or how you deal with stress. The last is the practical station. If it's face to face, there may be a practical station where you'll be asked to do some practical skills, which could range from suturing to drilling, possibly drilling a borehole. It changes every year, but practical skill stations are usually common. Now, if you've followed so far, you'd see that each of these stations pretty much mirrors all you'd expect in a neurosurgery department when you're working as a neurosurgical trainee. And it's just sort of an all-round recruitment process to ensure that they are recruiting the best of the very best, that can easily get in and um, adapt to the NHS. Yeah, so I've talked about the ST1 recruitment. Just to highlight that there is also the academic ST1, and this academic sort of program doesn't quite follow what I've described. For students and early career doctors that have done a lot of publications and are keen on research, there's a separate academic pathway, that you can apply to. And when you apply, you'd have another separate interview which tests your skills with regards to research, publications, translational medicine, and all of that. And if done well, and if you do well in that interview, you would have a provisional slot in neurosurgery. The added benefit of an academic program is that you get funding for about 3 years, to do quality research, and you have an added option of getting a PhD, before you even finish your neurosurgical training. I think there are about 6 academic clinical fellow posts in the United Kingdom, and they are very, very, very competitive. And out of the 18, they basically take about 6 slots, so to say. Even if you've gotten an academic training post, sort of, you'll still be required to go through this process to be deemed appointable. Okay, yeah, I hope we are all following so far. That's basically the rundown of neurosurgical training. But it's important to talk about the challenges. I mean, it's bad enough that it's very, very competitive and very, very slim chances of getting in. But as an international medical graduate, there are some challenges. There are some challenges that you'd eventually face. Even if you finish in the UK, there are still challenges that you face, and one of them is unemployment. You'd be surprised that about more than 50 neurosurgeons who have qualified to be consultants do not have training posts. And the reason is simple. At this point in time, the United Kingdom has more neurosurgeons than they need, in quotes. And this situation is only going to get worse in the next couple of years. And the problem with this is, because there's so much competition around getting a consultant post, it's caused pressures on the trainees and those who are trying to get into neurosurgery. For example, in the past 15 years, there used to be about 30 to 40 slots, possibly more. But because of this bottleneck, meaning you have more and more consultants, finishing training but not getting jobs, they have had to start reducing the amount of neurosurgical trainees, that can get into ST1, which is why it's currently at about 18 or thereabouts. And if the situation gets worse, this number can be reduced to about, who knows, maybe 12, 11, 10. And cardiothoracic surgery, last I heard, I think it's about 6 or thereabouts. So unemployment is a prevailing problem. So if you're coming to the UK to study neurosurgery and you get in, the problem doesn't end there. When you finish, it's going to be problematic to get a job, which is why a lot of people in neurosurgery currently take time off to do PhDs. Because by the time you finish, rest assured that most of the people that you would want to, that you are competing to get a consultant post, most of them will have PhDs, so to say. So you'll be forced to do a PhD. And then you'd also have to do sub fellowships, possibly 1, 2, 3 years sub fellowships, just so that you can get ahead of your peers. So I mean, if you by the time you're looking you're looking at the whole picture, and you're in training, and you realize that you have to do a PhD, which could take an extra 2 to 3 years, and you have to do a fellowship outside the UK or in the UK, which could take another 2 to 3 years. You're looking at specialty training of about possibly 12, 13, 14 years. Not 12, so possibly 8, 9, 10, 11 years, and there is no still guarantee that you're going to get a consultant post, in the UK. So unemployment is a big, big issue, and it's not going to be resolved anytime soon, unfortunately. Which is why a lot of people, are really, really vying for the academic training programs, because at least that way, you get some funding to get a PhD during the program. The next is the quality of training. The truth is the NHS is tailored towards service provision and service delivery, and people have said that the quality of training in other countries in neurosurgery is seemingly better than what you get in the UK, because the UK is tailored towards service provision. Do your job for the people. Try to treat the people as best as you can, as opposed to other systems, for example, in the US, where it's more towards training, training the residents. They take even a year to 2 years out to do research. There's no problem with jobs and all of that. So potentially, the quality of training in neurosurgery in other first world countries is sort of better than what you get in the United Kingdom. Again, this is arguable. This is arguable, really. But it's just a general saying. Next is racism. I mean, you can't really get away from racism, in whatever country you go to, and this is a prevailing issue. Most of the doctors that are referred to the General Medical Council are people from the black and the minority ethnic groups, and the GMC has conducted a series of investigations, to find out why. But really, it's just racism, implicit, systemic. It's everywhere, and it's one of the problems and challenges that you'd likely face as a trainee or a trainee to be in the NHS. Racism also goes hand in hand with bias, and then there's lack of support. This is relative. Lack of support is relative, really. I mean, because if you've gotten to a good hospital with friendly staff, that could be potentially good for you. But again, the NHS is chronically understaffed, and when you have a free service and you have a shortage of staff, this puts everyone under pressure. And when everyone is under pressure, there is a lack of support. Lack of support leads to mistakes. Mistakes leads to things like racism and referrals to the GMC and all of that. So lack of support is a real challenge for neurosurgery. And neurosurgery is a really, really busy department, and if there's no support, it could be a really big challenge for you as an international medical graduate. So these are basically the challenges, to neurosurgical training. And it's really, really something to think about. Which is why if you've decided that you want to come to the UK to do neurosurgery, you need to really, really um, consider all your options, because you're looking at potentially fighting for limited training slots, spending a lot of money and time doing research, publications, audits, and all that kind of, only to realize that you still need to spend more money and more time to do PhDs and clinical fellowships, after training, and still no guarantee that you're going to get a consultant training post in the United Kingdom. At the level of getting a consultant job, you would expect that racism, bias, and some of this lack of support and some of these things would still come into play. Yeah, so the odds are really really stacked up against IMGs, and people from the black and minority ethnic groups with regards to neurosurgery. And it's important, that you know all of this so that you make an informed decision as to which country or which specialty that you want to train in. So, honorable mentions. So, what if there is no ST1? I mean, what if you can't get into ST1? You can try to get into ST2. ST2 just means instead of entering at ST1 and spending 8 years, you'd enter at ST2 and spend 7 years. I mean, this sounds good, I guess, potentially, but the competition at ST2 is even worse. Last year, there was only one slot for ST2 level, and you would imagine that the things you have to do to get into ST2 are higher than the things you have to do to get into ST1. So you potentially spend more time and more energy and more money for to try and get a post that there's just only one slot nationally. I think competition ratio is about 13, if I'm not mistaken. Um, ST2 is also another alternative, but it's really, really, really competitive and near impossible. I mean, just one slot. The next honorable mention is what we call the Caesar pathway. Now, for those who have gone through ST1 to ST8, they are awarded a certificate of completion, that's a CCT. But there is a pathway to a consultant status known as the Caesar pathway. And this is usually reserved for people who have done neurosurgery in other countries and they've come to the UK and they're trying to get a consultant status to get on the specialty register by the GMC. So Caesar pathway is a form of unstructured sort of manner, in that you just come in, you get an employment as a neurosurgical center at a neurosurgical center, you work as a neurosurgeon for donkey years, you try to get some things signed, and then you're eligible to write, final exam, the FRCS, for neurosurgery, and then you get a job. Now the problem is for Caesar, it is evidence based, so it means you need to show evidence that you've achieved all the competencies for ST1 to ST8. Now in the UK, it takes 8 years, for a normal trainee, but for someone going through the Caesar pathway, the amount of years is unpredictable. I've heard of cases where somebody, a neurosurgeon outside the country from Asia, I believe, came to the UK and spent about 11, 12, 13 years, just trying to get some documents signed so that he can write the exam to become a consultant. And this is usually the case for many people going through the Caesar pathway. I mean, so imagine you've spent about 4 to 5 years in your home country in neurosurgery, and then you've come to the UK and you're spending another 10 to 15 years just to be able to get on the specialty register. And when you become a consultant, you would still be faced with the same bottleneck, that everyone is facing, no consultant posts. And even when posts, arise, they'll prefer those with the CCT and, yeah, those with the CCT, those that are home trained, and things like that. So, Caesar pathway really is a dicey option, but still a good option, for people interested in neurosurgery. Um, so yeah, I believe I hope I've been able to give you a balanced perspective as to neurosurgery training in the UK, and I'm hoping that sort of this overview will give you time to really think about what you want to do and decide. And once you've decided, you can now begin to work on things that you can achieve at undergraduate level, which I've showed you in the shortlisting matrix, or things that you plan to do at postgraduate level, the courses, the awards, the prizes, distinctions, and all of that. This presentation has been published in Journals of Medicine and Surgery. So if you need more information on any of the things that I have discussed today, you could the link to this manuscript will be shared, so you can just go and it's open access, so you don't have to pay anything. You'll be able to read a lot of things I've said. I've sort of documented them in detail, especially the challenges that IMGs and IMGs face. When coming to get a career, when coming into the UK to get a career in neurosurgery, or when they have gotten into neurosurgical training. Yeah, with that, I think I've come to the end of this presentation. I will be handing over now to um, the moderators. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Demi, for such a thorough overview. Yeah, very, very grateful for you taking the time to give us that talk and to even just to lay out the realities of applying to specialty training in neurosurgery, about the challenges that people will have to face, and yeah, just giving them a roadmap of what they need to do. So we have a few questions just now, and we will just run through it. So just a reminder to everyone else that's still on the chat, please type any questions you have in the chat, and we'll pick them up. Myself and the other moderators will pick them up and we'll ask them as we go. So when you're ready, Dami. So first question was, as an international student interested in doing neurosurgery in the UK, will I have to write both the PLAB and the MSRA?
Yes, so you need to write the PLAB first to get your GMC registration. And once you've gotten your GMC registration, you need to do some other little things like getting a CREST form and then applying for the national selection. And once you've done that, you will be able to write the MSRA. So invariably, you will need to write the PLAB exams and the MSRA at some point, but not at the same time.
Absolutely. So the MSRA is a mandatory process, well, for neurosurgery specialty training, isn't it? And PLAB is mandatory for entry into the UK. That's my understanding. Okay. And we have another question. Somebody said they read on the training requirements that if you have more than 1.5 years of clinical experience, they cannot apply for neurosurgery training. Is that true?
It's 24 months. If you have more than 24 months of clinical experience outside of your foundation training, you cannot apply at ST1 level. But if you have more than 24 months, you can apply at ST2 level, which, like I said, is just one slot that was available nationally, and it's very, very competitive. Yeah.
And just to add to that, so with regards to ST2 entry, although there was only one slot available and they advertised one slot, this year, this round of applications, unfortunately, they got to the end of the process and they actually withdrew the slot. So it's yeah. So then you have to take those things with a pinch of salt as well. Okay, so we just have some practical questions from people in the group. How do we get access to the recording, and will the slides be available afterwards? So two things. So we're hopeful that this has been recorded, and this should be available for viewing later on the event page, okay, or the SIGAP neurosurgery page. If that's not the case, what we can do is I'll leave my email address. So if people are having difficulties contacting accessing the recording, I'll put my email address in the chat. Please do feel free to reach out, and we'll make the slides available to you that way. Okay. Right. I think those are our questions just now. Please do post them in the chat if you have any other questions. Okay, so somebody's asking, can we get a certificate of attendance for the portfolio? Absolutely, there'll be a certificate that you'll get afterwards, but you have to complete the feedback form, okay, that will get sent out to you after attending this. Any other questions? Any other questions? Please just type them in the chat. And if any of the moderators on here have any questions or clarifications, please do feel free to ask them. I had just one question for you, Danny. So looking at the way you structured your talk and the way you structured the paper, it looks like you were gearing it obviously towards in-person interviews. Yeah. So talking about the telephone referral station, the practical psychomotor referral station. So a couple of us obviously we interviewed this year, and the stations were very, very minimal. Right? It was just 3 stations this year. So the portfolio stations where they asked a number of questions about motivation, like you talked about, then the clinical scenario, which was just 2 clinical scenarios with involving cases, and then management scenario again, which was just one long spiel of everything going wrong. I guess just 2 questions from that. Do you think that because they've done that 2 years in a row now, where it's been online, do you think that they're likely to keep it? Just a speculation. Do you think they're likely to keep it as online interviews going forward? And do you think it's going to go back to what it was before that? And yeah, how would you counsel people to prepare differently for an online interview as opposed to an in-person interview?
It's a bit tricky, as to whether the next one is going to be in person or online. But I think we have to look at the trend and how things are changing. Definitely, the online is the easier version, but traditionally, the in-person has always been the way. For at least for specialty training in the UK. If I were to make a bet, I think things will go back to physical next year because COVID has sort of reached a plateau and everyone is comfortable with COVID, and the trust, we are seeing that they are reducing, the isolation times less and less. And this is, we're looking at an interview for next year, February, March. By then, I expect that, the entire COVID discussion is going to be at an endemic state. And I expect that things will go back to face to face. If you're following the trend now, you can see that a lot of conferences are now face to face. We sort of highlights once you see that okay, you can start bringing that amount of people to a particular location. There's nothing stopping the people that are conducting the interviews, at least for neurosurgery, to bring things back to face to face. I don't know if I made any sense with that. Yeah, so yeah, you can just sort of follow the trend. There is a high chance, I believe, that things will go back to face, not just for neurosurgery, for all across all specialty recruitments, at least for next year. But if things do stay at virtual, it's quite unfair. Some people actually do better with virtual interviews, while some people do better with face-to-face interviews. I'm not too sure how to counsel someone to prepare for a virtual interview, other than just sort of be confident. There's a high chance that a lot of people will display the same level of knowledge and will have similar answers. And what will make the difference is probably just in the manner, the way, just the manner, in the manner, the way the answers are presented. So if two candidates, give the same exact answer for the same exact scenario, and one candidate was able to show more confidence and comfort in managing a scenario as opposed to the other candidate, subjectively speaking, the examiner could possibly give 2, 3, 4 more marks, so to say, to one candidate as opposed to the other candidate. So the only advice I can give from from my experience with virtual interviews, anyway, it's that it's more of the manner in which the answers are given, as opposed to the answers themselves. But I think things are going back to face to face. Let's just look at the trends of the conferences that are going to be coming up around September to December. If we see that all of them are face to face, then there's a high chance that the national selection next year is going to be face to face as well. Yeah, and of course, just to add, in as much as there are only three scenarios in the virtual interviews, the aim of national selection really is to make sure that the people they are selecting are, you know, sort of there's an all-round, capability. They sort of test each and every part of, working in a neurosurgery department. Things like practical and psychomotor skill is very, very important. It's always been, traditional in neurosurgery recruitment, and due to the virtual state of things now, that's been removed. I'm guessing that they'll be eager to bring that back, as well as some of the other stations that are there. I'm aware some of the stations are face to face, like the simulation stations. It simulates an actual face to face scenario. The phone call station simulate an actual scenario where you're in the room and you're picking up the call. So I think I think I have a hunch that next year it's going to be physical.
All right, Tommy, hello.
Yeah.
Thank you for a very wonderful presentation. So I have a question. So I just learned about this. You said there's like a 24-month time frame that precludes you from applying for ST1. So my question is like with all the points you highlighted for the neurosurgery metric scoring, for like those of us who are in Africa or like in Nigeria, like who come to the decision to come to the UK for neurosurgery late, like how do you now come to like cover all those points in that time frame? Like given that some of them are like this postgraduate or interconnected degree that we don't have here, some of us don't even have research opportunities except for like signing up and all of this. So let's say you come to the decision in your final year, maybe post internship, you feel like that time period, the realistic time period to gather enough points to qualify for the interview for the ST1 selection.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, I believe so. There's a lot you can do in 5 months, 5 to 6 months even. There's a lot you can do. You can at least you can get a lot of presentations. You can get a publication or two publications out. You can get an audit out. So final year is not really late. It's not really late to do some of this. If I would say it's the perfect opportunity really, because during your internship year, you would be having this knowledge at the back of your mind. You'll be able to ensure that you get some of these projects out there. If you see, some of your registrars or consultants doing projects, you join them and do those projects, or better still, you lead those projects. You initiate audits in your local hospital. You know, I mean, I think it's not too late. Would be possibly 2 years postgraduate. That's when we talk about you're too late, or maybe a year postgraduate. But if you're at final year, there's a lot that you can do, and that bounces off what SIGAF rather is trying to do, to make sure that medical students and early career doctors are aware of some of these things that really benefits them as they go on. I mean, I hated research and community medicine during my medical school years, because I simply did not know the importance, and there was no organization or alumni even to encourage us to do research. I didn't even know that there were different types of publications. All I thought was just knowledge, attitude, and practice. Yeah, but thankfully now my mindset has changed, and that's what we're trying to. As you must have seen, and a lot of people are seeing now, there are many, many things that you can do as medical students and early career doctors that will be really, really useful in whatever country you're hoping to specialize in, even in the country itself. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Thanks a lot, Dami, for the presentation. So it was very good. I think there's a question in the chat. It says, for a medical student, must you be the first author for your research to be considered? And must the publication be neurosurgery based?
So first author would attract higher marks than being a co-author. Unfortunately for neurosurgery, the specific descriptors are not public knowledge, so to say, unfortunately. But if you check that of similarly competitive specialties like cardiothoracic surgery, you sort of get an idea. So to score maximum marks, you need to have first author publications in at least three papers that are specialty related. That will earn you maximum marks. But if you've been first author in just maybe one publication, and or you've been a co-author in about 3 to 4 publications, that would earn you about 2 points or thereabouts. Any other publication falls to about 1 point. So as a medical student, in as much as you want to be a co-author, there's no reason why you cannot be a first author. Because if you've got a first author publication in medical school, that has earned you a very, very good amount of points in the undergraduate domain. And now you've now gotten a point in publications. And as a medical student and a first author, there's a high chance that your projects will be accepted at abstract conferences, and you pay very, very cheap money as a medical student to attend these conferences. So if you're a medical student, really now is the time to look at your portfolio and look at things you can do. So always aim for first author papers. If you're a co-author in a project, use that project to learn so that the next project you'll be a first author in that project.
And just to add, must the publication be PubMed indexed, or can you just publish in anywhere, and will that give you points?
It's a great area again. For core surgical training, that's for other specialties, they're quite clear that these publications must be PubMed indexed. But PubMed is not the only big database. There's other databases like Scopus, Embase, and you have some big journals that are not yet PubMed indexed. So to say, so I can't really give a definitive answer. But what I can say is that if the journal is a predator journal, it's not going to be considered because there's a list of predator journals, and these are the journals that you'd see that you pay cheap money to publish in. Those will not be considered. But I would advise you to try to aim for PubMed index journals. There are journals in Africa that are PubMed indexed. The Pan African Medical Journal, for example, it's PubMed indexed. There are other ones from Africa that are PubMed indexed that would be very, very receptive to articles from Africa that I can easily publish in, so to say. Yeah. Also, if you have the opportunity to choose which research project you want to get into, try and find out from the lead author which journal he wants to publish it in. Because if he intends to publish it in a local journal that is not PubMed index, it's better you just leave that and focus on something that will be worthwhile and you can learn from. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Any other questions from the participants, from the audience?
Sorry, I actually have a question.
Anything you want more
I have a question.
Information on? Please post it in the chat.
So, how do you evidence psychomotor skills? Like, do you give them your medals? Do you give them a certificate? Do you give pictures of you celebrating a trophy or something? How do you evidence it?
So, like I said, it's a great area. But I've come across an anonymous source, so to say, that has had a look at the breakdown, particularly for psychomotor skills, which also mirrors what you see in the cardiothoracic surgery breakdown. If you check the cardiothoracic surgery ST1 breakdown, it's it's almost identical to the neurosurgery breakdown, but they go into more detail. So to score maximum marks in that domain, you need to get national or international level achievement in the sports. Maybe you've represented maybe your trust or your medical school or some organization at a national level. or maybe you've won a national or international level chess competition, something, exceptional at national and international level, that will get you maximum marks. Extensive participation in the sports or in other activities, maybe you're playing the Rubik's Cube, you're flying a drone, you have, again, pictures. If they ask for evidence, pictures also count. Things like that, just to show, in quotes, that you've had extensive participation in some of these activities, will get you between 1 to 2. Minimal will be 1, and then of course 0 is 0. So it's very hard. I mean, if you don't have the national or international level achievement in sports or the arts too is there. If you draw and you have like a national level award, so to say, that could also count. But again, if you do not have the national or international level, which I think most people would not have, just try to rack up, extensive evidence of participation in common activities, like arts, design. Interestingly, tech is also counted as well. Things like chess. If you have pictures count. I know someone who got into ST1 in my trust, and what he put was that he plays the Rubik's Cube. That's the only thing he put. That he plays that. That's what he does. He plays the Rubik's Cube, and he put an evidence of him playing the Rubik's Cube. I think there was a competition for that or something. So yeah, it's a gray area, but national and international level achievements, if you have that, that's good. But if not, just try to have as much evidence in some of these activities as possible. Okay, yeah, just to add, for those in Nigeria, for example, there is the NMA Games, Nigerian Medical Association. So they do these national games, so to say. You can just go and participate and get a certificate of participation. Or if you're part of some winning team and you get a certificate, that will definitely count as a national level achievement.
Thank you very much for continuing to share your insights. Just looking at the chat to see if we have any more questions. Do continue to post your questions in the chat if you have them, everyone. And at this stage, just to remind people, if we have no more questions here, or you would like to chat to other members, other people who've joined the call, there is a networking session where you can speak to one another, you can bounce ideas off one another. Dami has kind of given you the pathway. He's told you a lot of the things that you need to do, and you need to start thinking about it. You need to think about them early, so you can get things on your CV. As we've mentioned, this is SIGAF Neurosurgery, Surgery Interest Group of Africa, and we're trying to make the process as easy as possible for you, to make it easy for you to get that research exposure, to get exposure to presentations, and to just give you the information that is not so readily available elsewhere. So make it the priority as well to join the organization, and we'll continue to put out these events for you going forward. All right. So if you have any other questions, please post them in the chat, or join the networking session after. And Dami, just a quick question for you. Is there a point at which medical students can sit the PLAB, or is it something can sit it as medical students? Would you encourage them to sit it early, so they know it's out the way, or do they do it in their intern year? What was your recommendation?
I think as a requirement to write PLAB, you need to have finished medical school at least. I think you need to have finished. I would have to look into that to be sure, but I think you need to have finished medical school at least to be able to write PLAB. And in fact, you need to actually get the English exam out of the way, the IELTS, which is a rate limiting step. Not because we don't know English, but it's just, I don't know, it's just a tricky exam. What I'd advise as a medical student, and as a medical student, you actually need to pass and finish first. That's actually the really limiting step. It's not really easy, except you are some brilliant student or something. It's not really, really easy in Nigeria to finish medical school like that. So when you finish medical school, the first thing is to write your IELTS, because most people wait till after they finish internship to write their IELTS and stuff. But you want to be as fast as possible because the experience limit is it's around the corner. You need to finish medical school, quickly write the IELTS exam. You can take the PLAB 1 exam during internship. Until you finish internship, you take the PLAB 2 exams and you apply for GMC registration. And once you've done that, you get a job in the UK. I would advise that preferably get a job in neurosurgery, at least for 6 months or 1 year, and then you apply for selection, just so you have sort of idea of how things are run in the neurosurgery department, which I can assure you is 100% different from how things are back home. I worked in neurosurgery in Nigeria for as an intern for a month or so, and when I came here, it was as if I had not done neurosurgery at all. So yeah, as a medical student, just focus on finishing your exams, look at the portfolio, look at the things you can do, try to get some research, try to do an audit. SICAF is running an audit course, which I believe you should attend. If you've not attended, try to attend the next 2 sessions, so that I get practical ideas of small audits that you can do, and get presented and just basically start working. Yeah, it's possible if you plan well, and with the grace of God anyway. But yeah.
Just one question for you to clarify. So obviously you mentioned about the experience cap. So we said 24, no more than 24 months clinical experience. Are there
Yeah.
any other sort of experience cap that people should be mindful of as well?
Yeah, so there are two major ones: more than 24 months outside the foundation year, and more than 12 months of neurosurgery experience, or any neuro experience, neurosurgery, neurointensive care, neuro rehabilitation, neuro oncology. If it has neuro in front of it, don't stay there for more than 12 months after your internship. Because once you've done that, you'd have to go to ST2, which I think they said is not more available anyway. So yeah, so the gray area actually is whether the first year after the internship would count as the FY2 um, in the UK. So that's really the gray area. But I mailed the Yorkshire and Humber Deanery, to sort of clarify this. And what they've said is the first 24 months of clinical experience outside, if you've trained outside the UK, the first 24 months of clinical experience will be counted as a foundation year. But this was as at last year. Can't really say for this year. Things might change. It's a very, very flaky department. But yeah. So just be mindful of those two things. Don't get more than 24 months outside of foundation training.
And would you recommend? So obviously you advise people coming across to go straight into working in a neurosurgery department. Obviously there are things they can apply to, such as a standalone foundation, year 1, or standalone
Yes.
foundation year 2 programs, which will still keep them eligible. So are there ways you can get around that experience gap?
Yeah. So here's what the deanery said. If you finished outside of the UK, the first 2 years would not be counted. Any other experience outside the 2 years will be counted. So if, for example, you spent 2 years in Nigeria working outside of your 1 year internship, and you come to the UK as an F2 standalone, which technically is actually training in quotes and should not count, because there's already a 2 year sort of umbrella where you've worked as, and as an actual doctor, so to say, you would be considered overqualified. What they said is, once you've hit the 2 year cap, any other thing outside, whether be it found the loan, be it the loan, whatsoever, will be counted, or be it a training program, whatever, will be counted. So, um, for now, I mean, just try to do what you can, within the first 24 months of your internship. That's the advice. The standalone would protect you for co-surgical training, definitely, but it will not protect from neurosurgery. They count the first 24 months. Again, this was last year anyway, but I doubt things will change this year.
You talked a lot about the challenges and how difficult neurosurgery training is to get into. Obviously, people who are on this webinar who want to apply, they're very dedicated, very keen. But given the challenges of at least application here in the UK, you said about thinking about options. So would you recommend that people think about applying to many different places, or look at pathways in
Yeah,
many different parts of the world?
yeah,
Or
yeah. I mean,
how about backup options?
the best advice I would give someone who wants to study neurosurgery in the UK is to not. Is to not, because there's at every level, the challenges are of the same magnitude. They really just change masks, so to say, and if any, it sort of gets worse. And the prediction by the SBN on the workforce is that these problems are going to um, it's essentially going to keep rising. It's going to take a number of years before it gets better. Um, in fact, it's almost like there's a better chance to study neurosurgery in the US. Because it's the competition ratio in quotes, is smaller. It's just because of the bureaucracies in the US. So the number one advice, if you want to come study neurosurgery in the UK, is to not, if you have opportunity to cultivate, um, an interest in another specialty, that would definitely be the best advice. But if you've chosen neurosurgery and you're dead sure that it's the UK you want, then there's a lot of work to do. So my number one advice is, don't do neurosurgery. That's number one advice. And if you're doing neurosurgery, probably not in the UK. And if you decide I want to do neurosurgery in the UK, then you have a lot of work to do.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Anyone else in the chat? Otherwise, maybe start thinking about winding down. So just a reminder to everyone who's still on to join SIGAF, join the neurosurgery arm. Okay, we have lots of exciting things on, and lots of opportunities for you to get involved with. So please do keep an eye on that. And just a reminder, we've not started to advertise this yet, but we'll be putting on a similar webinar about a month from now. Okay, so that'll be pathways to neurosurgical training in the US. Okay, so do please come join us for that one as well. But it's been
Hopefully the speaker has a brighter
brighter outlook.
brighter perspective.
Okay. If there are no more questions, then I think we'll just call it a night there. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for your time, Dami. Thank you, Daya. Thank you, Hilary, for moderating as well. Right. All right. Good night, everyone.